there were some tracks with vocoders on, right? Everywhere you'd get like or whatever, right? Yeah. I didn't know what a vocoder was, and I was like 3 or 4 years old, you know. I assumed it was like a session musician robot who would go around all of the studios and sing his parts, and then they cut him a check, and then he'd be off, you know. Maybe like, you know, maybe he'd go to like a hot tub with some robo friends, you know, or whatever, afterwards to unwind after a busy day in the studio. So
they went to Juilliard, you know, like.
I find myself thinking outside the box a lot early on in modular, because as we all know, there's a lot of videos that show people playing music, but not so many videos of tutorials. And there's so many modules. I mean, come on, how could they for every single module? So it turns into like a deep dive into the self. I have to basically have to operate within and without to navigate these multiple pathways, this mirrored surface of musical infrastructure. It's insanity. But once you get roped in, it's like talking to God.
Oh my gosh.
It's like talking to God.
Woo!
Oh yeah.
I started at San Jose State and immediately was drawn to Alan Strange and the synthesizer and all things synthesizer. And we would get a lot of demo stuff. Alan was working with Don Buchla up in Berkeley. So he brought in the first music easel to show us. At the time, we were all using either the Series 100 Buchla modular or the E.M.S. Synth AKSs.
Yes.
Which is what his
Our two
band,
favorite things.
I actually think that what's happening in electronic music right now is special.
Yes.
I don't think that we don't know right now.
I agree with that. Absolutely.
And we're going to look
Talked
back
about
on
it
it and be
today.
like, man, we had no idea. We were just innovating and doing our thing. No, fuck no. This is an awesome time.
Yes.
We're grabbing it. We're building scene.
agree.
They were like cheering on everybody. This is a very different.
Whatever you can find, you're at the flea market, the thrift store, wherever. Oh, it's got a scuff on it. Oh, that key's a little cracked, you know, and learn how to fix it. And that's really where I picked up all of my knowledge, is finding these broken things on the curb and at thrift stores. Having a friend who says, you know, I have this DX, it doesn't work. I don't know what's wrong with it. Here, just take it.
Just take it. Yes.
And, you know, just being that guy who can fix stuff.
Exactly.
So,
I got some friction mallets, you know, these things.
Yes.
And I got contact mics. So I was clipping contact mics onto things and just like
Oh, here it goes. Here it goes. You've slid all the way
making-
down.
making noises. And then I had it, I was recording them and I was hooking them up to my synths and everything. So
Whole world
that's
of discovery. Yeah.
yeah. So like I had an old fan, you know, that, you know, like an oscillating fan,
Oh yeah.
like a cage, and I like hooked on like a thing onto there, and I got a bow, like a for like a stringed instrument, and I was bowing it. It was making these weird, like, you know, weird sounds, almost like a water phone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
And so I went down like some crazy rabbit holes trying to make sounds out of like contact.
Like, well, things like feedback are a big one, right? Like, and then cybernetics, that's big too.
Exactly.
Like, you're putting something out and then it's being processed in some way and then brought back into the input. And, you know, audio feedback, is that happening at like instantaneous levels, but in the a modular or like a computer music environment or something, you can sort of create like these stages that happen at discrete times, and then control how much of like the other influences are making it back into the starting place and how that's going to push what's happening next. And I do think that's really interesting, very, very interesting stuff that often leads to musical output that doesn't sound like
I remember when those things came out.
Yeah,
they were
like,
so good. I had serious
Yeah.
gas. It was like my original gas, and I never got one. See like something of yours come up, I'm always like, yeah, the blue one.
Yeah. You need a t-shirt with that, like the blue one.
The blue one.
Stage, I feel almost like Like they are my best friends.
Yes.
They have a character, you know, and they talk. We talk very well together. Like we also what you just said about the UK influences, you know, those boxes have that. They have that crunchiness, and they have those tubes where you can compress the sound and make it sound warmer. And there's you can literally make the waveform sing with this thing. There's a modulation part on it. And you basically, if you have like a waveform, you can create a sort of LFO or play with the oscillators. So it can be like a sample or like something from the synth oscillator. And it makes it like super groovy, and you can record that motion sequence. And if you play, for example, 80 BPM, you can that waving, it's like surfing, you know, it's like literally, it's like
the BBC put out, you know, every other week, you know, sound effects albums, and we got hold of them, and it got to the point that when you'd go to your friends' houses to, you know, to play records, I distinctly remember this time, my friend that learned the guitar before me, I was up at his house, and his mum shouted down the hall, "We'll keep the noise down." And David said, "It's okay, Mum. Drew's just bought his sound effects albums again." I was going, "Wait till you hear this. You know, it's a depth charge going off it. You know, whatever." You do become kind of evangelical about it. You know, what do you mean you want to listen to Who's new album? Listen to this. It's the sound of weightlifting. You know,
this basically picks up electromagnetic fields and so I would go all around my studio being like, and it just picks up the the electric sounds, and so I just created textures out of that, you know, just again to add unique flavors to.
Well, it's very
things,
ghost adjacent vibes here,
right?
Like,
because what inspired me to do that was that a lot of times, you know, you associate a presence with the flickering of lights or electricity kind of like being interrupted or things like that, you know. So I thought that was like a good sonic equivalent of it.
Heck yeah.
So to speak.
Absolutely,
I
like
love this.
You know, the pieces of the score that I've heard, which is I think most of it at this point, there's like I hear a lot of that. I hear like filtered noise like being used to great effect,
a lot.
to musical effect, in my opinion. Like it's
love that.
Yeah,
it's really nice. Like
circuit. So that was my first introduction to a synth or a group.
Have it to this day, or have you sort of like progressed through
that's
on to other things?
So there's a funny story with that. So I have sold it, but the funny story is that I sold it to someone in the Golden Shrimp Guild, and then they had it for a bit, and then they actually sold it on to another person in the Golden Shrimp Guild. And it's gone to another person in the Golden Shrimp Guild.
This is the way.
I think currently it's in the ownership of Prepaid Obsidian, and Killer B, who had it at one point, did the awesome thing where he made like a library card. So like on the back of the circuit is actually like a library card that has typed out the people who have had it before.
This is like
so
Fellowship of the Traveling Circuit.
Yep, that's literally what we joked about.
The typical story. Your parents, they have vinyl records. So and then there were 3 records. It was Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, Autobahn, Kraftwerk, and ABBA. That's what.
The trifecta.
So we had way more records, but that were the 3 records that I wanted to listen all the time, you know.
Wow.
And somehow, you know, the funky from ABBA, you know, and the disco, and then this dark and melancholic deep sound from Pink Floyd, and then Autobahn, you know. So somehow this stayed with me. And then my sister, I have a sister, she's 4 years older. Of course, she wanted to listen to electronic music, and then it was the Orb and all that stuff, you know. So I got influenced by that. Yeah, and when I was 15, I saw the first time a DJ playing. So then I thought, okay, I don't want to play the clarinet anymore. Now I want
Tell me if you've ever seen one of these. A Zoob tube
I'm
Do you know what it
stoked
is?
about those.
You know, it was probably $5 or $10 at the place. No, it's a cardboard tube, and it's got a spring inside of it, and it's got these literally solo cups in the ends, and so you've got this.
I love this so much.
Pretty funky, huh? There's a spring in there.
Yeah, it's kind of like a spring reverb, but
it sounds awesome. Here you go. Look at their tagline.
I need more Zoop Tube. Oh my god, the ultimate cosmic sound machine. Are you kidding me?
Many of us have heard of the Critter and Guitari, right?
Yeah.
You know, the company.
Yeah.
Early on, I had a Kaleido Loop. I think it's like an 8 or 12-bit sampler that allows you to tweak, has a transport like a tape control. So it's got, you know, high speed, dead or off, and then reverse. It comes with this funky little built-in microphone. Here's the clashing of the spring. This is what I was looking for.
Got it.
Awesome. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
It's so amazing when they bring people non-stop that we sometimes had to have 3 GSG people talking in parallel and even taking people out of the tent because it was so noisy that they couldn't understand what we were saying. Not just because of the acid booth right next to our tent, but still...
The acid booth was definitely
so
part
cool.
of the vibe. That helped, I thought.
I
was
mean,
like,
we had
see,
the
like
best
this.
music. We had the
Want to
best
feel like
music
you're on
right next-
cocaine for 3 days? Have the acid booth next to you.
I mean, weren't we? Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, the
Hey, what
shrimp-
happens to Superbooth stays in Superbooth.
Yeah, there you go. The shrimp.
You can't remember anyway, so it's fine.
My dad was a total nerd. He worked for Philips and he created machines just for fun. He created like these little boxes with lights and dials for us to play with. Simple synthesizers, just little plastic boxes with 3 or 4 dials. And after some years, he created like 12 of them, and we put them all together and made them into like a spaceship thing. That was a very big influence, but also playing video games, of course, mainly Commodore 64 stuff in the early 80s. The music and the sound chip on the device, obviously very cool sounding. Yeah, the games I liked the most were the games that had the best music. Some game developers knew that. They got the best game music composers, like one of my favorites, Rob Hubbard. So I think that was the earliest synthesizer influence I had in my life. I was a super young boy playing video games on the C64. And my older brother, 5 years older, he was really into early house and early acid and rave stuff. He started making music himself on the Amiga, on the Amiga 500. But he didn't have any musical background, and I had piano lessons. So every once in a while, he asked me to play some sort of
concept of ambient music, you know, like Brian Eno and stuff, is that it's in the background, and like you said, it's something that can just be part of the background, and it's not, for lack of a better term, it's not intrusive, as in it doesn't like call you in. And that's why for me there's some music that's it's very intense without being intense, and like the actual nature of the sounds, you know, it's not like brute force or anything, but it's really intense. And I like what you said with the storytelling, that it's like a need to connect to something that's greater than myself, like to create this connection. And that's why I there's a lot of for me, like Dorian scale and like ancient musics, like folk music, it like speaks to me on some kind of, I can't even explain where the feeling comes from, but it feels like it's way more than me, than just my existence. Like it goes past generations and speaks of a story like that's in my ancient past, and it connects me to that. And so it's like creates this timeless
How
gateway.
much are you pre-planning for your live set, especially for modular on the spot?
Well, in the beginning, I was playing it like a trained classical pianist, and I remember doing 2 or 3 shows where you could like put them side by side and play, and they were almost exactly the same. But then you're not reading the room, you're not really experimenting, you're not preparing yourself for the mistakes that always happen. I think nowadays it's kind of a half-patched thing. I played in New York last year for New York Modular Society. So I had my patch set at like 100 BPM, and the first thing I did when I started my set was like, I just spun my PAMs up to 140 and said, I don't know what's going to happen. It was all really about the crowd interaction. And then at the very end of the they were so pumped up, picked up my case, and I was just like, I started pulling the cables. And so you would just hear this like, it's just like pulling apart. And then I held it up like it was my kill, like, yeah. And then people were like, oh, what's this? It was really cool. I'd never rehearsed it. I didn't know. It just had you get a feeling based on the crowd of what you want to do. Mm-hmm. So I ruined my performance mixer, but it's a story that I'll remember because it was just like getting caught in the moment.
I wish there were more groups like Synth Lab out here in LA, because they have like a barring system for people, and they concentrate. They give priority to the BIPOC community, but you can actually like just rent some hardware for only like $1 for 3 weeks and then return it. So I think that there should be more of those types of organizations around everywhere, so people can test these out before they buy it, because a lot of the purchases are really big for people, so if they know what they're getting and they can try it out for 3 weeks. What a beautiful concept.
Now, I hadn't thought about modular since university when they had the Moog there, which had these enormous cables, and you plugged a couple of things in, and it didn't do. I mean, for heaven's sake, you got like 8 notes out of a sequence. It's like, what's the point of that? I want a Fairlight that's got multiple tracks of 16, this, that, and the other, and all this stuff going on. I didn't
play some seventh chords.
I didn't tie into that at all. But coming back to it now, having come out the other end of the software, my software environment, it was like a massive release of this external gear. Being able to look away from my screen, take my hand off the mouse, and just start making music without any reference to the computer at all was just bloody marvelous.
And the thing is about the grunge era was always about sort of odd sounds and sort of textures and stuff. Mm-hmm. How weird you could get leads and sounds to be. So in a way, that's what attracted me to grunge. Of course, it's mainly distortion and stuff, but there's also a lot of texture and textural sounds in that genre.
Yes.
So you wind up collecting pedals, and then you wind up collecting synths and all lots of stuff, and then you wind up in a room full of stuff.
Yeah, and then you end up on Synth Friends.
Mm-hmm. A lot of things that people don't realize about solder is that, like, when you do solder, any airborne contaminant can get trapped into the solder. So every time you heat up an old solder joint, you technically get a whiff of like the past. It's in some roundabout way.
You can tell if it's been like in a smoker's zone. You can smell like cigarette smoke or cigar smoke or weed.
Yeah.
You can smell different smells get trapped in it.
That's interesting. Oh, I can see why this person wanted to know.
That is so wild. It just continues to add to like the spooky, haunted mythos of it all.
Actually, Don, the original boards, for the most part, are very, very clean. I'm sure they use something that there's a hole in the ozone layer that, because they used to use, I think, fluorocarbons of some sort, but they were super clean. It was just where the wires were tacked on for, like, they went to the potentiometers of the output. It was where the wires are. But original Buchla boards, even back to the 60s, are extremely
and so he kind of got me into Casio. That was like the going in the baby pool or something. Like, it's cool, it's really tiny, it's a toy still, it's cool. And then I just like kept kind of getting more into bigger and bigger ones. But basically our rule, like, we don't like to have really big synthesizers. We like small keyboards. What's our protocol? We have a rule.
We have 3 criteria.
Yeah.
So one is has a gig.
So he wanted to show you the criteria. So what is, it needs to have an internal speaker, because we like playing out in nature. We like jamming. We like this kind of thing. And we like that element. So almost always every synthesizer keyboard we buy, there's exceptions, but we try to always have ones that we can have batteries in some way, can be battery powered in some way, and can have a speaker in some way.
Is that the MT35?
This is
MT40.
MT40. Okay.
It's a really cool one. So this one is like, yeah, so a speaker, battery, what else? What's
mini
the other?
keyboard.
Oh yeah, mini, smaller. We don't like
mini
the
size,
really
we have
big
mini
ones.
size keyboard.
And so we have like a ridiculous amount of instruments in our house that fit this criteria. So yeah, that's kind of like our musical project. We do a lot of playing with kind of like smaller.
I wish this was around. This format and the streaming thing was around 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the idea that I can get prepped and like go chill and like be on my own and read or just relax and then get out in my PJs and play for the same amount of people, and those people don't have to commit to it. Like, and it's better for both sides, because if somebody's like, hey, if I say, hey, come check out my set, right? And someone's like, yeah, okay, where is it? Well, it's 30 minutes away. You take the train, whatever. Maybe the person wants to go out and have some beers and check it out. Maybe they don't. But there's a certain amount of pressure on that, right? Because they show up and they're like, well, this, you know, I hope this is good because I came all the way out and all this stuff. And then if they don't show up, then maybe they couldn't make it because something else happened. But this way, they can cook dinner and just check you out. They can play with their kids and just check you out. Like, they don't have to sacrifice anything or barely anything to see what you do. So there's no, I don't know, expectations is the wrong word, but there's no frustration on their point if they're like, I wasn't really feeling that, but that's cool. It's just on, you know?
Yeah.
And then from my side too, like, I don't give away 6 hours of my whole night, spend $75, and then wake up the next day feeling raggedy because I put back 7-8 beers over the course of 4 hours.